I've just bought the bike I've always wanted, but here's the problem. I'm meant to flip it for profit in my challenge to turn £100 into an e-bike for my dad. Our cash pot is currently sitting at £508, so in this video I'll show you how I plan to sell the bike for a profit, but we'll have to see if I can resist the temptation to keep it. Woo! So this is a Voodoo Canzo. It's a 27.5 inch full suspension mountain bike that retails in the UK for roughly about £1,000 to maybe £1,100. I don't know what it is about the inexpensive entry-level bikes, but I've always found them really endearing. It's a little bit like the Walmart bikes in the US, in that they're a lot cheaper than the named brand bikes, but generally speaking, they have a decent component lineup and they offer great value for money. And I know, especially in the UK, Voodoos and Boardmans and Carreras seem to get a bad rap, but actually, in my experience, they've been excellent bikes as long as you take care of them. So when this was listed about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I couldn't help it coming onto my radar. Now, the person that was originally selling this bike was asking £400. Now, the listing was the typical listing where the bike hadn't been washed, the photos were really quite poor. It was quite close up of the components, but didn't actually show the bike as a whole, so I think a lot of people glossed over the listing. The description was also just a cut and paste of the spec list, so again, it didn't really give any indication to the actual condition of the bike, and because it's dirty, you couldn't visually see that from the photos either. So after the first week it was listed, I got in contact with the seller just to ask if 400 was really what they were hoping to get for the bike and if there was any movement in the price at all. And they never responded to me, so I assumed that maybe they thought I was just being a little bit cheeky and they'd wait it out. Anyway, 3 more weeks went by, and by that point I'd sold the last project bike, which was the Voodoo Azon. So I got in contact with the seller again and I said, would you mind if I just pop round one evening and have a look at the bike? And they were quite happy for me just to come around and take a look at it. So I met the seller, who was really friendly and explained that they bought the bike brand new and they'd only ridden it a couple of times and they just wanted rid of it to generate some cash and some extra space for a new motorbike that they wanted to buy. Now, there was a few issues with the bike that I'll go into more detail in the next section of the video. I then asked the question of what they were hoping to get for the bike, and after a little bit of back and forth and negotiating, we agreed on a price of £340, which is exactly what I wanted to pay for the bike, so I was quite happy to get it for that amount. You see, I've always wondered about this bike in particular because when I was looking a few years ago to buy my next mountain bike, it was a toss-up between the Voodoo Canzo, a full suspension mountain bike, or the Voodoo Bazango Carbon, which was a higher spec carbon fibre framed hardtail bike. And I think that's often the dilemma that we go to when we're buying our first entry-level mountain bike. It's, do you go for the full suspension bike or do you go for the equivalent hardtail that's got a slightly better spec? And so if you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I went for the Bazango Carbon. And so I never got to own this bike. And so I'm really intrigued to know what it's actually like. So my intention is to sort all the mechanical issues out on the bike and then ride it around for the next week and see what I think about it. And if I like it, it might so happen that I end up keeping it, but we'll have to see about that when we get round to it. So I think this is going to be a pretty quick condition report because I've managed to pick up a bike that I think is probably the best condition mechanically out of all of the ones that we've bought so far. That said, we always start out with the cosmetic condition, and as you can see there are quite a lot of scuffs and scratches to the frame that are consistent with a bike that's just been left in a garage, probably up against a wall, getting scraped and scuffed by things that are moving past it. There's no crash damage or anything that I can see like that, but I'd say cosmetically, yeah, it's maybe in not the best condition, but at least it's fairly easy and cheap to restore that. I was told by the last owner that it really hadn't been ridden all that much. You can even see that from the tyres. Of course, you can ride the hell out of a bike and then change the tyres and say that they're the original ones, but I do believe the last owner that these are the original tyres. So I bought this chain wear checker tool because the one that I had previously only went down to 0.75mm of wear. So I took this to the sale and I initially thought it was broken, but I've tested it on the other bike and it's fine because it didn't even slot in. As you can see there on 0 wear. So what things have I actually got to do to the bike? So first of all, the gears are a bit out of tune. They're not shifting particularly well. So again, it's a quick fix. Just need to adjust the cable on that and that will get them shifting nice and smooth again. Second of all, while I've got the back wheel turning, you can see there, it looks like, oh no, the wheel's out of true, but it's actually in the tyre, if you can see it there. I was thinking, oh, if it's been sat for ages, it might have a bulge in the tyre, but I think actually, you can see this little ring that goes all the way around the edge of the tyre. So this should be in this kind of position, but as you can see there, the tyre hasn't quite been seated correctly, and that's why I think the tyre is wobbling around. So what I'll do is I'll get the back wheel off, deflate the tyre, and I'll get a little bit of soap or something in here just to help that tyre seat itself properly against the rim. The next thing is the rear brake is really quite spongy. As you can see there, that's the full throw of the brake. So I think these need to be bled as well. Also on the front brake, I don't know if you can hear that, there's a little bit of rubbing going on there. So you might need to just true that disc rotor a little bit better, or adjust the caliper. But apart from that, that's really the extent of the mechanical issues that need to be solved on this bike. And essentially it's just going to be the labour of getting it deep cleaned and in a really nice new looking condition. You can even see here it's still got the little warning sticker on. It's still got the reflectors, bell that it came with. So I think that indicates how much use this bike has actually had. So I'm going to sort some of those mechanical issues out so I can go out and ride the bike. The drivetrain was fairly mucky and the chain had got some light corrosion as well, so I used my handy chain cleaner to quickly remove the grime and get it running well again. As you can see here, it's not perfect, but it will be fine for me to ride on for the next week. The next issue to sort out was the skipping gears, which needed a little bit of playing and fine tuning to get working again. Right, so that's running a lot smoother in the hardest gear now. Essentially the back wheel wasn't mounted correctly, and also the limit screw needed adjusting to bring it back into line. But of course now you can hear that the back brake is now rubbing, which I'm going to have to sort out as well. Who the hell installed things that tight? The rear brakes felt like they had some air in the system, so I pulled out my bleed kit, added some fluid into the cup, and then burped a decent amount of air out of the reservoir there, making them feel way sharper than they were before. So I've just taken the back wheel off to have a look at the tyre. I don't know if you can hear that kind of rattly, spokey sound when I'm engaging the free hub there. I was thinking, oh no, we've got a broken spoke on here somewhere, but actually no, it's just the reflector here. You can hear it's a completely normal sound when you dampen this. I'm just not used to having these reflectors on. I usually take them straight off. I'm going to leave it on there for the moment because I think when people are going to buy the bike, they'll probably want things like that on there because it looks a lot newer, like it came out the shop. Okay, so there's a few spots here where it hasn't seated correctly. Let all the air out. I'm just going to get a very small amount of washing up liquid just around the areas where it wasn't seating very well. And there we go, it's seated all the way around. So yeah, you can see now there's no big bulge to the tyre, which is great. You can ride it now. So the gears aren't skipping anymore, which is nice. No rubbing brakes, and they feel pretty sharp as well, which is great. I can't wait to ride this on the trail tomorrow. Right, well, I've been riding the bike around for the last week, so am I going to keep it? Well, the answer is I'm not quite sure yet. You see, I enjoyed the bike. I thought it was good. I thought it rode quite well. I'm not at the riding level where you can really tell much difference between a £1,000 bike and say a £2,000 or £3,000 bike. I suppose it's good from a cost perspective for me. But anyway, I thought the full suspension system worked perfectly fine. You know, you could lock it out. Got it all set up for my rider weight, and it seemed to work fine for the blue and the red trails that I've done this week. That being said, there are a few things that I think I would have to change on this bike in order to justify keeping it. The first one is the tyres. So this has got 2.25 inch width tyres, which in my opinion, for like a 140mm trail bike, is quite a narrow tyre. That's what I would expect on like a XC type of bike. So I think I would want to upgrade them for maybe 2.4 inch tyres. A very minor thing would be, I probably want to change these grips. They're actually fine as grips, but they've just got a really weird feeling in your hand. They've got these little O's, which I think are meant to be the kind of the Voodoo O. And they honestly feel like little suckers from like an octopus tendril or something. So I definitely want to remove those. The brakes I was originally not too sure about on this bike, because I've had Clarks before, I've not found them to be all that powerful, but these were perfectly fine for the riding that I was doing. If I was doing more technical trails, longer descents, probably would want to upgrade these eventually, but these were perfectly fine for its intended use. This bike has also got Shimano SX12, and I've had SX12 on my Voodoo Bazango Carbon, and I got on okay with it, but having rode the SRAM NX and GX since, I have to say I'm probably less of a fan of this drivetrain. It's quite difficult for me to describe it in words, but it doesn't feel quite as robust, say, as the other drivetrains from SRAM. Again, it's a very minor thing and it's not really a deal breaker, but I suppose it is feeding into my decision about whether it's worth me actually keeping this bike or not. I thought it might be a dilemma coming to sell this, so my plan is now to essentially bring the bike up to a nice visual condition. So give it a nice deep clean, polish the frame where it's got scratches, maybe touch a few of those in where it's reasonable to do so. And then I'm going to list it up for sale and just see what attention, what offers I get. And if I get anything in the next week that I think, I'm quite tempted to go for that, then I'll know it's the right decision to sell the bike on and then not keep it. So I'm going to do all that now, and then let's have a look at the visual standard that I can get it up to. Just while I clean the bike, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you that are supporting this series, whether that's by liking and commenting on the videos, or those of you that have kindly purchased products from my website. This has recently allowed me to buy a clip-on microphone, so I hope the improvement in audio is noticeable. Thank you very much. Now, a few of you were wondering what type of polish I use, and I actually use some T-Cut, as you can see here. However, I am quite careful with this because I know if you use it on paintwork that's quite thin, it can damage it and make it actually even worse. So I only use this very sparingly and with very light pressure to begin with. It doesn't actually require that much to make a big difference to how the paintwork turns out. Some light pressure. And as you can see, that's removed a large portion of those scratches. I then finish off by adding a small amount of protectant spray to a rag. I then work this into the frame, which gives it a really nice finish. Right, so with relatively little effort, just doing a deep clean with the bucket and sponge and then going in and polishing out some of the scratches, you can see what a big difference that's visually made to the bike. It's a real shame that the last owner of this bike didn't do those very small extra steps just to really highlight the condition of the bike. I think most people, when they looked at that listing, were just assumed that the bike was in a pretty well-used condition. Anyway, I'm going to list the bike for sale now, and then we'll see what sort of offers we get. Okay, so I've had the bike listed over the weekend and just left it to see what sort of interest it got, and wow, the amount of people that were showing interest in this bike was actually crazy. If we compare it to the other bikes that we've done in the series, I'd say if you took all of the offers and all of the interest on those bikes and combined them together, it still wouldn't be as much as I've received on this bike. Some people, it was literally verging on harassment. They wouldn't stop messaging me about the bike. Anyway, after careful consideration, I have decided to go for one offer, and I'll explain why I went for that offer a little bit later in the video when the sale completes. But for now, I'm just going to go over and do some pre-handover checklist items that I normally do, just to make sure that the customer will be happy. And the first part of that is many of you were recommending that I buy myself a torque wrench, and I've generally avoided buying one because they've been quite expensive, but I found this one on Amazon, which was the cheapest one that I could find that actually came with a certification. Now, I'm not sure whether the certification actually means very much. Apparently it's got an accuracy of plus or minus 3%, which I think for bicycles is acceptable, I suppose. So I'm not sure if this is going to be any good, but I'm just going to go around the bike and loosen off and then tighten any bolts just to satisfy myself that the bike is ready to go, really. Anyway, if you're interested in buying one of these, you can check out the link in the description to where I bought it on Amazon. So as you can see here, these bolts have got a maximum rating of 10 Newton meters. However, that is a maximum, and what I can find online is that they should be torqued up to about 5 to 8 Newton meters. So what we'll do is we'll go for 8, just to be on the safe side, and then I'll just see if it's still slipping. So we're listening for the click. There we go. Yeah, no movement on there, so I think that's good to go. Now, one small thing that I like to do when I'm preparing the bike for sale is just to ask what the person's weight is. And if the bike's got air suspension, just to roughly get it in the right pressure range. So when they hop on, they can just use it straight away and then they can do any fine adjustments themselves. So they've just sent me the rider weight. And so I'll just go in and make that adjustment now. Again, it's the small things that you do for people that lead to those 5-star ratings, which again, that helps you in future when you want to sell more items. Okay, so the handover went smoothly. They were really happy with the bike. So that's another one sold. Now, as I mentioned, I received many offers on this bike over the time that it was listed, from £360 all the way up to £500. And you might be thinking that it was the higher offers that actually swayed my decision about whether to sell this bike versus to keep it. But those higher offers, I actually got a bit of a bad feeling from. I don't know, it's just something about the communication felt very pushy. And I've learnt my lesson, as you've seen earlier in this series, to really trust my gut when it comes to this buying and selling stuff. I got a message from another potential buyer saying that they wanted to buy this bike in particular for their son's birthday, and their communication in contrast was far more polite. They seemed just way more down to earth, and they also put in a reasonable offer as well. So in the end, the bike sold for £420. And in terms of our spend on this, well, there isn't really too much. I mean, there's stuff like the water to wash it, the detergent, maybe a bit of brake fluid, that sort of stuff. Petrol to drive the bike back and forth, but I'm not including any of those expenses as part of this challenge. In fact, I'm going to look at all those numbers at the very end of this series. So that means that we've got a challenge profit of £80, which brings our total cash pot for the series up to £588. And so by just making the bike look cosmetically better and fixing some of those minor mechanical issues, we're able to add a heap of value for not actually that much time. I'm also not going to gloss over the fact that I got to use the bike for a week. I think this highlights a lot of things that I've done in my life, whether that's motorbikes, cars, bicycles, where I bought them for a good price. I've done a little bit of work to them, but generally looked after them quite well, and then showcased them in a nice listing, and then sold them for just as much as I paid for them, or in some cases actually making a profit. And I think that last part, the ability to sell things and showcase them in a nice way, is actually quite a skill in itself. I actually put some content together a couple of years ago showing people how to make their listings look nice and professional and how to effectively get the most money for your bike, but I never put it out there. So if it's something that you might be interested in, let me know and I'll finish that off and then get that put out there. Right, so I think that was a pretty successful episode, a good amount of profit generated for the challenge as well. Now, if you want to watch the next episode, click the series playlist here, and if you want to be notified of future uploads from me, click the subscribe button here. Thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.